Hi everyone, it's Laura from Om Tara, and today is Beading 101 Day. Today we are going to be doing another stringing project. I'm going to be teaching a wavy, I called it a wavy pearl bracelet, but I'm actually going to show you how to make it with some other beads too. So I'm going to show you some alternatives, and we'll start in just a moment. And I just want to thank you all so much for being here with me today, and if you're watching on the replay, thank you for tuning in. And so today we're going to keep going with our stringing and crimping. I love stringing and crimping, and I really love teaching techniques that you can take that simple act of stringing and crimping and just kind of expand on it, and you could do an entire line of strung jewelry that looked completely different. It would have different dynamics, the weaving techniques are really great to add in. So that's what I'm going to do today. I'm going to show you another way of using this weaving technique. It's usually with a thread, needle and thread technique with stringing wire. So I'm excited about that. I've taught this bracelet to children, to adults. I've taught it for years, and every time I teach it, I've taught it with many different types of beads, and every time I teach it, people really like it. And you can also translate it into making kind of a choker length necklace. It's a really pretty necklace, very simple. I have a couple of different styles of beads and waiting on my table, so I will show you, I think I might show you just a couple of different starts, and then I'll just launch into the rest of the bracelet. And I didn't mention this on Tuesday, but there is our word of the week, which is praise. I got a great little note today in my email about praise in terms of encouragement. So just connecting with people and just telling them how much you appreciate them, what you love about them, what you like about them. So I just thought it was perfect, and I just want to tell you all how much I appreciate you. And I'm so glad that you're showing up here. I'm so glad if you are a seasoned beader that you're here. I'm so glad if you're just starting out. I'm so glad if you are someone who's just in between. I really believe your courage to stretch yourself, no matter where you are on that beading, the path of beading. I just am so inspired by all of you. So thank you for showing up, and thank you for showing up for me and being here with me. So I've got my little notes here. Let me bring them around here. So this is what we're going to do today. So we've got our wavy pearl bracelet materials, and you will see that I'm not going to be using pearls. Let me get my cutter out of the way. So again, we're going to be starting with our stringing wire, and because we are doing a weave, I am working with kind of a thinner stringing wire, and you're going to notice that I tend to work with thinner wire. It's just my habit. The pieces that I create are usually made with something a little bit thinner. If you are using heavier beads, of course you can use a upwards of 0.019 up in there. But just remember that if you are going to be weaving two wires into a single bead, you want to make sure that that bead can accommodate the thickness of that wire going through twice. So that's why I'm using 0.012 or 0.015. That's kind of my favorite little sweet spot right there. So when we cut our wire, you want to be thinking, again, it's the same formula we've been using. If you're just tuning in today, I'll go over it. So you decide on your finished length, and finished length means the length you want your piece to be done when it's finished. So if you want a 7-inch bracelet, that would be your finished length. So we're going to take that finished length, add about 5 inches to it, and then multiply that number by 2. So here's my example. I am going to be making a 7-inch bracelet. That's my finished length. So I'm going to take 7 inches plus my 5 for crimping, weaving, doing things a bit like that. Comes out to be 12 inches. And I always sort of round up to something easy to work with. I take my 12 inches, I multiply it by 2. There I am with 24 inches. So I am going to cut 2 feet of wire. What I did today is I did cut a little bit more, and I cut about 28 inches. You and I are going to see if that was too much. But if you tuned in, I think last week on Tip Tuesday, you saw that how you can use all those stringing wire bits for earrings. So it's okay if you end up cutting a little bit more than you need, because you know you can make them into earrings, all those little cut off bits. So I cut a piece of about 28 inches. I'm going to be working with 2 crimps. I'm working with a 2-part clasp, and my clasp today is going to be a hook and eye clasp. And I'm working with one strand of beads. And for this project, the rounder the better. And you can also use rice-shaped beads. So I would say like a rice pearl would be fine. Anything oval, round is fine. But don't for this project, a flat bead does not really work. And I'll explain why when we're making it. You'll see why a flat bead wouldn't work. And I mean like a flat kind of front to back. It could be round shaped this way, but a flat, like a coin shaped bead isn't going to work for this project as well as something that has more kind of a chubbiness to it. What I'm working with is one strand of 3mm crystals, and I am going to be using some size 11 seed beads. Now, you don't have to use the crystals. I put them down here because that's what I'm going to be using. I have taught this bracelet just using a strand of beads and seed beads. You can also use number 8 seed beads, which work fine. It just changes the look a little bit. So I'm using crystals and seed beads. You could just use seed beads if you want to, or any other small bead for our second strand. So you'll see what I mean when I get going. But hopefully that makes sense. I'm going to start with some bead choices. I couldn't really decide. I finally decided on what I'm going to be using, but I figured I'd take you through my kind of my thought process with choosing beads, color, and all that. So I'll do that next. So this is the strand of beads that I'm going to be working with. This is a petersite bead. I love it. It's a really beautiful stone bead. Yeah, so these are just probably around 8mm. And I like that size, especially for a bracelet. It gives it a little chunk. It's not too big, and it's not too delicate. So I'm going to be working with these 8mm petersites. And I'm also going to be working with these sort of hot goldy smoke. They're a smoke bead, but they have this beautiful gold flash on them. So these are Chinese crystals. They're very, very reasonable. Nowadays they come in really beautiful colors. They're usually very inexpensive. So I'm going to be using these two together. I undid this end, so I'm trying to make sure they don't fall off. So if we go back to our lesson in color, this is more of a harmonious blend. So I'm not really using any contrast at all. So this is, I would just say this is more of a harmonious blend of color. And then when I was trying to decide what seed bead I wanted, here's kind of a gray tone, and petersite does have a bit of gray in it. I think there's one. And I am going to use a few seed beads. There's that gray, the light shining on it. But then I found these beautiful kind of matte green bronze, and I'm going to use these. I just think these are gorgeous. And they kind of keep in line with this kind of goldy green smoky flash. So I'm going to use both. I'm going to use all these three for my piece. If I had wanted to change the color, I could have definitely used the gray, but I like this. It'll keep the whole tone the same. So I'm going to use those. Let me get these out of the way, and I want to show you something that I was pondering. Oh, let me take that out. I brought in another strand of these. But I was first wondering if I wanted to do just green pearls. These are sort of a sagey green-gray pearl. I really liked them. And these are about a 6mm pearl, 6 to 7, and they're considered a potato because they're sitting, the hole is going through the short side. If the hole were going through the long side, that would be called a rice pearl. But since it's sitting sideways, it's called a potato. So I thought these would look really nice. Again, very neutral toned and kind of harmonious. And then this was something I was thinking about too. So let me bring this one on. This is the first stone that I was considering, and I have a whole batch of these stones, and it just fell off out of the batch as it was hanging onto my floor and made a very nice plunk sound. So I was thinking, oh, maybe I should use this one. And it got me thinking about using gemstones for the project today. I think it's a rhyolite, and I have to go back in my memory banks and look it up, but it's really pretty and earthy. So when I was trying to find the perfect crystal for it, I first thought, maybe to use this sort of salmony matte color. It brought out sort of the orangey pinky bone color in the beads, and it would be again somewhat neutral. Let me bring that up. There it is. And it blends really well with some of the beads in there. So I was thinking about using those as a color combo. And then I was playing with the idea of even using this gray tone. And when I was in my house, it was hard because it was a little overcast and the light wasn't that great. But I still think that looks pretty nice. It adds a little bit of a contrast, and it would make the stones pop out a little bit more. So that's more of a smoky, I think it has just a little bit of a flash in it. I liked that one too. And then I really liked this one, though it's completely out there. And it looks a little bit more kind of Montana blue in there, which it might be, but it has kind of a milky matte look to it. And in fact, it's somewhat, it's a complementary color. So here I've got my oranges and there I've got my blue, and they are of a similar tone. So I was even thinking that might be a fun combination to do too. So I just want to show you kind of what I was deciding on or thinking about with my color combos. So you could choose your bead to be the same or analogous. You could choose them to be complementary. You can really choose any color combo that you want. So those are just some ideas that I had. So I'm going to start with my Petersite, and I didn't even untie it, but I think I will, so let me just untie that knot, and I'm just going to keep them here on the table. And I love these because they have these just gorgeous, just all these beautiful, it almost has a cat's eye, like a chatoyance in it, like a, somewhat like a labradorite, but without the flash. It has that sort of, well, it's called a chatoyance. It's like that little shimmery shine in it. I just love this bead. And then I'm going to bring my crystals in, just leave them down there. And I'm sorry, my throat is a little bit dry today. And I've got my stringing wire. And this is again, this is 0.012. I'm going to unwind it. And I'm going to use gold because I thought I liked that gold flash in the Petersite, so I'm going to use gold to go with it. And I also have my gold hook clasp, and I'm going to be using some gold crimps. I'm just going to pop them over there. So again, I've got this is 28 inches of wire, and I am going to, as we have been doing the past couple of weeks, flushing up the ends. So I'm using, again, this is one wire that I'm going to be using. I'm going to fold it in half, and I'm going to be using both ends as if they're their own wire. So, but I'm going to start here. So I'm going to create a small little loop at the bottom where I'm going to be putting my clasp on. I'm going to dump some of those out here. I don't need that many. And I'm going to put, I know if I look at my clasp hole, let's see if I can get focus there. My seed beads are not, I don't think they're going to fit through that hole, so I'm going to probably put 3 seed beads on one side. So all I'm doing is using my wire as a needle, and then I'm going to put my clasp on, and then I'm going to do 3 more seed beads. I'm just creating a small beaded loop down at the bottom where my clasp is going to go on. Now what I'm doing is flushing up the end and letting all that stuff drop down to the bottom. And yeah, I don't think the seed beads will float through, no. So what I'm doing is I'm going to have my clasp here and my seed beads on either side. Once I put my crimp on, it'll tighten everything up. I'm going to take my 2 ends, they're even. I'm going to take 1 crimp, and once I'm going to take both of the ends and put them both together through the crimp. And this, oops, jumped off. Find it. There it is again. This is again called a parallel pass through because both of the wires are going through the crimp together. And I'm going to slide that crimp all the way down to the bottom. And I'm just going to adjust everything, and that looks like a perfect size loop for the clasp. I don't need it to be too big. And I'm going to grab my crimper. It's my little Om Tara crimper. So you've got the dip and the tooth. I'm going to put my crimp in the dip. Let me just see. Still trying to figure out this mount system. Make sure I have some space. So I don't know if you can see that, but my crimp is sitting right in the dip, and I'm trying to make sure there's no seed beads slipping into the jaw of my crimper. So they seem okay. I'm going to pull tight, and I'm just going to gently squeeze. And again, if a little one of the seed beads had snuck in between the jaw, if I go slowly, I can feel them in there, and then I could adjust. So let's see what I've got. Yeah, that looks pretty good. And I'm going to again keep my crimp that's nice and tugged. It's not going to go anywhere. It's crimped already. And so I'm just going to not fold it because I want my wires to separate for the next step. Oh, actually, I'm going to do something else. I changed my mind. As I do. If you've been watching, you know I do change my mind. I'm going to put the seed beads up out there. And I'm going to take one of my crystals, and I'll thread both tails through the crystal, just like that. So I've got my first little crystal on, and then once the first crystal goes on both wires, now these wires are what I call working wires. They are going to each get their own beads. Then we'll pass back through, so I'll show you. So I'm going to take my first Petersite and put it on one wire. Bring it all the way down. And then I'm going to take my opposite wire, and it's going to get the crystals. So what I'm going to do is, I already measured it, but let me just act as if I didn't. So I'm going to keep my crystals on, and this is what I was talking about, I think, last week, about keeping your strung seed beads on their thread instead of just dumping them off, or gemstone chips. What I'm doing is I'm going to put my stringing wire through 4 crystals and then just pull them off, so that way I don't have to have them sort of floating all around. Let me just get them out. Sometimes it's easier to take them off. We'll see how that goes today. And so what I'm going to be doing, let me bring it up. I've already tested, but I just want to show you what I'm doing. I want these crystals to wrap around my bead like that. Now my Petersite, you can see that there's a little bit of a space here. Once I tighten everything up, you won't see much of that, but I can see that I probably need 2 more crystals. So I'm going to grab them. And this might be just sort of a pain to keep them on the thread, but I just wanted to show you. I might just end up taking them off. If I were stringing a whole strand of seed beads, I would keep them on instead of having to do that hunt and peck. So here I go. So that's perfect. So I'm going to create this crystal kind of hug around the bead. Then both of the wires are going to go through another crystal together, parallel pass through, and then I can bring it down. So let me see where I am. So at this point I'm going to turn it so you can see. I can pull both wires. I just pulled the Petersite wire, and then I'm going to pull the crystal wire, and so that kind of helps tighten everything up. And don't worry if they sort of spring out, because they will. This is a seed bead, this is usually a needle and thread project, and stringing wire does have sort of a mind of its own more than thread, so it will tighten up as you go. So you can already see that the crystals are curving around and going this way. So this wire is now at an angle. So this is going to be our crystal wire. So you always want to put the crystals on the wire that's going out at an angle, and the Petersite is going to stay on the wire that sits straight. And generally you put the Petersite on the same wire, but what you really want to look for is that angling. So here I go. I've got my Peter sight on the wire, and then I'm going to put 6 crystals on my opposite wire. And I could just dump them all out, and I think I might end up doing that, but here we go. I think I've got 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So as I put my stringing wire in, I pull the bead wire out, and they're sitting on my string. And here I go. And I'm going to come around and just check my size. Should be right. And both wires get 1 crystal. You can see that they're starting to shrink up a little bit. 1 wire is getting shorter. And I'm going to take my wire and tighten it up. So pull my, there's my Peter sight, so I was able to pull my wave a little bit tighter. You can see this wire, here's my crystals are angling like that. That's my crystal wire. This is my Peter sight wire, or my gemstone wire. I'm going to put my gemstone on and pull a couple of these off. And I might actually want to see if I can get some of those nice golden ones in there. And if I really wanted to, I might, you know, kind of pick and choose the colors that I wanted. But for here, if I were, I'm just going to kind of put on what I have. And then 6 more crystals. To help me, I think I'm just going to nip off that curly part of the wire, of the plastic, and thread my stringing wire through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If you do thread on and then thread off like I'm doing, sometimes you miss one, so just make sure that one of them doesn't fall off onto the bead mat while you're working. Oh, here's my Peter sight. And then just check your wave and make sure. Sometimes if you put your beads on the wrong wire, you'll notice, because it'll just go like a scallop rather than this serpentine or this zigzag. And I'm going to grab one more. Put both wires through the one. Now I could have a 3rd bead if I wanted to. If I really wanted to, I could switch it up, and I could, I'm pulling both wires, I could have the pass-through bead, which is one of my crystals, be a 3rd bead if I wanted to. So let me just make sure. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yep. I'm going to pull both wires, tighten everything up, keep going. So there's my curve. This is going to be my crystal wire. This is my Peter sight wire. Oh, there's no knot. Nope, I'm just using this pass-through bead here. See how this crystal's kind of pulling them both together and locking them in place. So I'm going to tighten that up again and keep going. So here's my Peter sight wire. And 6 more. Usually what I do is I hold them in my fingers like that and then thread my wire through. Sometimes this is useful to do. It's really helpful when you're working with gemstone chips, because once you dump those out on your table, sometimes it's very hard to find the hole. One more bead here. Flush up the ends, put them both through. And if you are commenting, please know that I will check back as we do that, when I finish up doing some of the beading. So again, I'm going to pull tight, pull. Sometimes I don't know which is which, so I just pull them both. And I'm going to check. Looking good. You can see that it needs to tighten up a little bit more, but once I put my next beads on, everything sort of tightens up. So here's if you get lost, look at your pattern, tighten everything up, and look at the bead that, look at the direction of your beads, and they'll tell you, this is my crystal wire. Keep going. This looks beautiful with pearls and seed beads, or pearls and crystals. I've taught it where it's just pearls and seed beads. It's really pretty. And you could do it with rice-shaped pearls too. So, I want to tell you why I'm said don't use coin-shaped beads. Let me just grab one more. I think I'm going to just dump these out because I think it'll be easier. I believe I'm going to be using most of them. And we'll see which takes me longer. Hunting for them or keeping them on the thread. So now I put both wires through. I'm going to tighten everybody up. Now I want to just show you why a coin would not necessarily work for this. So here's my round bead, and it doesn't matter if my round bead spins on the wire, there's always going to be beads around the outside of it. But if this were a flat coin and it spun, sometimes the bead wouldn't fit in the curve very well. So it's better to have kind of a spherical bead or even an oval bead, but not a flat or a disc-shaped bead. So again, here's my petersite wire going up, my crystal wire is going out to the side. Threading on. And actually, keeping them on the thread might have taken a little bit shorter, but who knows? So I've got 4, 5, 6. Now your beads, if you're using a different kind of bead as your kind of your serpentine, or the one that's making the wave, then you may need more than 6. So you just have to do a little bit of testing that first segment. Oh my gosh, let me bring that up to my eyes. There. And just get your number. So your number might be a little different than my number. And you don't have to use 8mm beads. I chose 8mm, but you could use smaller, or bigger. Really, you can pretty much choose anything. The only thing I would say is stick with something that is not a flat bead. But other than that, you could change it up as you wish. This is really a pretty combo. Okay, and I'm going to keep going. And I'm just going to make sure that I'm putting it on. Yep. Now again, I'll say it, you will know if I put this on the wrong wire, I would know pretty quick. So my stone bead is 8mm. 1, 2, 3, and 4, 5, 6. And if I forget a bead, I would know pretty quick too. Then I'm going to flush up the ends of my wires, put on the pass-through bead. And again, this is just parallel pass-through. I'm just going through. Oops, if I can see it. I'm going through this bead. Oh my gosh, there. Both wires together. And then I'm tightening everything up. So I'm going to pull and pull. Check. And if you notice there's a gap, you can always kind of do a little bit of tightening up, go back and tighten it up. The beads, the stone beads, end up on the same wire. And the serpentine beads, or the curving beads, the wavy beads, are on the same wire. And I have done this before and I was thinking, I was trying to decide if I wanted to tell you this because it can be confusing, but you could pre-string your beads, your gemstone beads, your round beads. You could do a round bead, a crystal, a round bead, a crystal, a round bead, a crystal, all the way up, and then just add your wavy beads and then go through the crystal that's already on that wire. Now you just have to make sure that they're not falling off, so you want to be clipping the end of your gemstone wire, but you could pre-string this and then just weave in and out like that as you go. That's another way to do it. But I wanted you to see what's actually happening with the beads, so I wanted to show it to you this way. My Peter sights there, and then my waves. I'm going to get my eyes down there a little closer instead of trying to do it with my fingers. So I'll say that part again. If you wanted to pre-string 1/2, you could pre-string with your gemstone and a crystal, gemstone crystal, all the way up. And then what would happen, let me do that here. Pretend I already had this on. So if this were pre-strung, my gemstone and my crystal, I would put my wavy beads on and then just go through the crystal bead. You just want to make sure if it's already on the wire that you're going through in a parallel pass through. So you're putting your wire in the same direction that the other wire is going, so the two ends are going to end up in the same direction. Just want to make sure that you don't that you go in the right way, in the right direction. So here I go. Tighten up, keep going. I think if you had it pre-strung it would go faster, but I just wanted you to see, since we've been doing two sides wires folded in half, I just wanted you to see the path, what's happening with the thread path of the wire. Oops, oh my gosh, sorry. Let's see how many I have on there. 5, and I think 1 more. Let's check my numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, yep, and then thread them both through. Yep, there we go. There's my wavy side, and here's my straight side. Oops, let's grab something like that maybe. And 6. I know, I love this color combination. That little flash of gold is so pretty. And when I did my counting and measuring, I thought I had just enough on this strand, but then I thought I should make sure, because I wanted to not run out. So I brought another strand. Double up, put them both through, keep going. This is definitely taking a lot longer than some of our other demos, but hopefully it's all right. I'm going to make sure I'm pulling the right wire. Sometimes you can see they're getting a little confused here, but if I pull, I can pull on the Peter sight wire and everything will tighten up. Keep going. Go, 2 more. And are doubled up. Ends flush up. One of the ends you can tell is getting longer or shorter than the other, so it gets a little harder to get them to go through together. Oops, you can see that. But keep going. And I'm going to tighten that up. Let's just see where we are. I'm going to get my measurements. So I'm about almost 6 inches, so I've got maybe 2 more beads to go. And I am going to add another little tiny seed bead loop on the end to add the rest of my clasps, so I'm just going to keep that in mind too. Let's grab this end and just do it the way I did it before. much quicker. And then both. You could also alternate. If you do this enough and you notice that you're always cutting off a certain amount on the main gemstone side, you could also, instead of where we doubled it up in half, you could kind of alter it so one is longer than the other, and then you may end up needing to use less stringing wire, but you could do that. But I would say I would try that once you start making a couple of them. You'll see what works best for you. Let's go here. And one more wave. So that is 6. Take that off, and then both go through one. And remember, we started the whole bracelet with this parallel pass-through. So your very last pass-through bead is, when you're ready to end, or when you get to your length, this last pass-through bead is gonna be what you'll have before you add the crimp. I'm just gonna test myself again. I'm tugging on the ends. I'm getting pretty short, and I'm gonna just pull out and yeah, I'm past 6, and once there's my 6 inches of beading. I don't know if you can see that. There's my crimp is here, and I'm all the way here. So that means that my beaded section is 6 inches, and my clasp, this side adds about a 1/2 inch, this side and the loop is going to add a little bit more than a 1/2 inch. So I think I'm good. I think I'm going to stop here. Depends on how tight or loose you like your bracelets, but I think I usually tend to end up, because of the clasps I use, I usually have about 6 inches of beading, and that seems to work for my purposes. All right, so there's my last pass-through bead. I know, I love the sparkle, so pretty. Okay, my last pass-through bead, and then I've got my last crimp. So I'm going to put my crimp on. That one wire is definitely longer. I'm going to trim it up just to be easy on myself. And you can see that all that weaving took up about 3 more inches than the wire that my Peter sight was on. So I could, over time I could say, oh, if I keep using beads about this long, I can give myself, 3 inches less of my main wire. But I could also save that piece that I'm going to cut off for earrings, and I think I will. So now's the time to tighten everything up. This is my longer one. That's the main or the core of the piece. I can pull on it and tighten everybody up. And remember, here we are. I'm going to just trim that off just so the next steps can be easy. Just going in with the back and then trimming that off. Save that out. So this ends the same way, or we finish it the same way that we have been finishing the last 2 bracelets, where once it goes through the crimp, these wires act like they're one wire. So I have just enough wire to work with. So if I had wanted to have a little bit more, my wrist was a little bit bigger, maybe I would have cut 30 inches of wire just to be sure. And now I'm going to go through my wires are together. Once they go through the crimp, they act like they're one wire. Then I have 3 seed beads. I'm going to put my other half of the clasp on. Both wires go through, and then 3 seed beads. And there's my other end. And again, we talked about this last week, that if I needed to make it a little bit longer, and I could tell that adding another of this beaded section would make it too long, I could always fudge it here. I could add, 4 or 5 seed beads on this side, or 4 or 5 seed, and then 4 or 5 seed beads on this side. So this little loop that I'm making, that's going to hold my other end of the clasp, I could just extend it and make it a little bit longer. Nobody would ever see that that was really there. So you can always use this finishing end to add a little more length if you want to. So here I go. I've got my crimp. I'm just kind of separating everybody out. I'm going to double back with my wires back through the crimp and come on out. And actually I'm just going to go right through that bead while I'm at it, because why not? Oops, yeah, he can hold 4 wires. Let me give myself a little more space. I feel like I'm a little tight here. Let me do that again. Yeah, here I am. So there's my crimp, there's my crystal, yeah, and they both popped through. I loosened it up a lot, so that means I'm going to really have to work to tighten it up, but sometimes it's just easier if you do give yourself that extra room here by the crimp just to be able to get back through. And again, I am putting both of the wires through that bead so that when I trim, the cut end isn't right at the crimp. And I'm just going to pull. Since I didn't have to split the wires, I put them both through this bead, I don't have to split them. And I'm going to just tug. Now you've seen me do this. Sometimes it just doesn't look very good. Looks like I'm fighting, and part of me is fighting with it, and I'm just going to keep tugging and tugging and tugging until everything feels tight. Now I see that my Peter sight here got a little loose, so I'm going to pull the beads down. We've done this before, where I pull the bead, I pull down the crimp. If you don't pull the bead down and you don't pull the crimp down, then getting this slack out is really, really hard. So I'm pulling one wire, and now I'm pulling the other wire. And I think I can live with that. I think I can live with that little gap of wire there. And I think, well, let me try one more time. I'm using my fingernails, and now I'm going to just pull and pull. I'm pulling individual wires, and oh, I felt a little bit come out. That's great. A little more slack come out. Take time to really get this tightened down. I can see that there's a gap in there, and I want to pull it out. Okay, I think that's good. Once I crimp, everything will get kind of tightened up. So I'm going to just give a little bit more space to get my crimper in there. Sorry if my hands are flying all over the place. I feel like I'm jumping off camera. And it might have been nice to give myself a little bit more wire to work with. So maybe next time I would cut myself a little bit more. Okay, I'm going to get my crimper in there, and you can see there's really like not a lot of room here. So I'm going to do my best to get these seed beads out of the way. And I don't know if you can see what I'm doing. Sorry, I'm trying to get my eyes. That little seed bead is jumping in there. There. Sorry. And I'm going to pull. Now that my crimper is holding the crimp in the space, I'm going to tighten everything up. And make sure no little seed beads are in the back. They're all sitting out there. I put 6 on, and I can see 6 of them. And now I haven't crimped yet. I'm just got it in there, and now I'm going to just squeeze. And that should be okay. I'll let everybody jiggle around, and everybody will kind of relax. And then I'm going to take my cutter, and remember, go in with the back of your cutter and get in as close as possible. I think I'm going to do it with 1 first. There's a lot going on in this little space, and you really don't want to nip the wires that your beads are on. So just be really careful. I'm trying to get my eyes close enough. There, just nipped it. Once I do that, I can kind of wiggle around and jiggle around till it's all done. And there I go. There's my bracelet. Now I want to say about these little hook clasps. Sometimes these hook clasps, you can see there's a little bit of space. I'm hooking it right there, but there's a little gap. So sometimes what I do with these hook clasps is I just squish them just a tiny bit. I just use my pliers to just close up the loop a little bit like that, so that going in is a little bit snugger. And I probably will tighten that up a little bit. So just if you notice that your hook clasps, they fall out, just give it a little squeeze right here at this kind of the ball end, just so it makes the eye part have to fight a little bit to get in there. So there's my bracelet. I call it the Wavy Pearl Bracelet, but I didn't use pearls. But you could if you want to. So there it is. Really fun. So I'll go back over. We used our little 3mm crystals, and you could use size 11 seed beads. You could also use size 8 seed beads as your wave. So you could use seed beads all the way. I could have used the crystals as my loop if I wanted to. If I didn't even want to add seed beads, I could have used crystals as my loop. But I wanted to just make my loop a little smaller. Then I used my 8mm Petersite beads. And let's see, this strand had, let's see, I used 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 beads. And there's a lot left on this strand. So if you find a really beautiful strand of 8mm rounds, you're going to get a couple bracelets out of it. So let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So that is the length of beads that I used to make this bracelet. And I would have at least another, I could have gotten 3 bracelets out of this strand, plus some extra beads. So it's a great project. Oh, and I even have more. I have some leftovers. So I definitely could get 3 bracelets out of this strand. It's economical, a way to use your beads economically. So I'll put those away. So I've got my crystals. I used my size 11 seed beads, my 8mm rounds, and here's my bracelet. Wavy Pearl, Wavy Bead Bracelet. Yes, you could. So if you want to, when you're making your piece and you know there's your crystal thread, put a little Sharpie mark. You could put a black Sharpie mark on the end of that crystal, or on the end of the Petersite, you know, the main one that has the gemstone. So yeah, if you want to mark which is which, absolutely. You could do that with a Sharpie on the end of the tail end of the wire. That's a really great idea. And so our Tuesday tip day is at 10 a.m. Pacific time on Tuesdays. And then today, of course, we meet at 3 p.m. Pacific on Thursdays. So if you're new to my work and to watching my classes, thank you for being here. And thank you if you've been here from the beginning. I'm so grateful for all of you for just tuning in and listening to what I have to share. If you are new and you haven't liked my Om Tara Facebook page, please click like. I'd love that. And also, if you haven't signed up, subscribe to my YouTube channel. It's Om Tara Bead on YouTube. And if you have a friend that doesn't watch on Facebook, or you want to go back and you like watching through YouTube, all my videos are going up there. And then also, please join my tribe. There's a little subscription box on my website, omtara.com, where you can join my tribe, and it pops you in my newsletter system. And you get, there's a way for you to get the cheat sheets. I call them the Beader's Cheat Sheets, and it also gives you a 10% off coupon. So it's called Join My Tribe, so I'd love it if you would do that too. Okay, so thank you again for joining me. Like my page, and if you would subscribe on YouTube and join my tribe, I'd love to have you. And so I'll see you next Tuesday. Enjoy your weekend. I hope everybody's getting some cozy weather, and sending love. See you next time. Bye. Happy beading.